Right now, as you are sitting there listening to this, your testicles are actively snitching on your great 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 grandmother. I know that sounds like the beginning of an HR violation, but trust me, it is pure evolutionary biology. Because if you want to know what ancient human sex actually looked like 200,000 years ago, you don't need to squint at blurry cave paintings or dig up fossilized bed frames. You just need a scale, a basic understanding of anatomy, and a willingness to look at the weirdest math equation in nature. Here is the setup. Across the entire animal kingdom, and especially among primates, the size of a male's testicles relative to his body weight has almost nothing to do with how much of a macho alpha male he is. It is entirely determined by how his female partners behave. Specifically, it is a permanent biological receipt of how many different guys the average female sleeps with during a single reproductive cycle. To understand why, we have to look at the two absolute extremes of our evolutionary family tree, the gorilla and the chimpanzee. Let's start with the silverback gorilla. This is a 400-pound wall of pure muscle, testosterone, and untamed rage. A silverback spends his entire adult life defending a private harem of females from rival males. If another male steps onto his turf, the silverback doesn't challenge him to a gentlemanly debate. He rips the intruder apart like a defective G.I. Joe. Because the silverback fights his battles out in the jungle before the bedroom door even opens, he has zero competition inside the bedroom. He's the only guy on the schedule. And because biology is ruthlessly efficient, it doesn't waste energy building hardware that an animal doesn't need. When a 400-pound gorilla gets aroused, his erect penis is an inspiring 1.25 inches long. And his testicles? Combined, both of his balls weigh about 30 grams. That is roughly the weight of a single slice of whole wheat bread. The most physically dominant ape on planet Earth is packing the equipment of a field mouse. Because when you own the monopoly, you don't need a fire hose to get the job done. Now, flip the coin and say hello to the common chimpanzee. A chimp weighs about 100 pounds soaking wet, roughly a quarter of a gorilla's size. But down below, he is dragging around 120 grams of heavy artillery. That is 3 times heavier than human testicles, on an animal that is half our size. Why are chimp balls so comically massive? Because chimpanzee society is basically a 1970s rock band tour bus. They live in multi-male, multi-female groups where everybody is sleeping with everybody. When a female chimp is fertile, she doesn't pick one special guy to take to the movies. She will mate with nearly every adult male in the tribe, sometimes dozens of times a day. And to make matters even less romantic, the average chimpanzee lovemaking session lasts a blistering 7 seconds. It is not a candlelit dinner. It is a pit stop at the Indy 500. Because her reproductive tract is a crowded subway car of rival genetics, the male chimp does not fight other males with his fists. His sperm fights them. Evolutionary biologists call this sperm competition. It is a literal biological lottery. If 4 different males deposit their genetic ammunition into the same female in the same afternoon, the guy who prints the most lottery tickets wins the jackpot. So, the chimp evolved massive industrial-scale factories to pump out well over 1 billion high-speed aggressive swimmers per shot, just to flood the zone and drown out the competition. Which finally brings us to you and me, and the awkward, confusing middle ground of human anatomy. If you put a human male on the scale, our testicles weigh an average of 40 to 50 grams combined. We are significantly more endowed than the harem-ruling gorilla, but we are nowhere near the hyper-competitive superballs of the chimpanzee. We sit right dead in the center of the primate spectrum, and that medium size is the first major clue in our prehistoric detective story. It tells us that ancient human females were not living in strict, lockdown gorilla harems, but they weren't throwing wild 7-second free-for-all beach parties either. They were doing something much messier. To figure out what that was, we have to look at the other receipts our ancestors left behind in your pants. Take a look at your swimmers, or rather, let the scientists do it. The World Health Organization has a handbook for what constitutes a clinically normal, fertile human male, and their baseline standard is hilarious. According to the medical consensus, as long as just 4% of a man's sperm are normally shaped, he is considered good to go. 4%! That means up to 96% of your sperm can be swimming in circles, growing 2 heads, missing their tails, or just floating around dead like driftwood in a lake. And a doctor will look at the microscope and say, "Yup, looks like a healthy athlete." In a chimpanzee, a 96% deformity rate would be evolutionary suicide. They need elite military-grade swimmers because they are constantly in a high-stakes sprint against 3 other dudes. Human sperm, by comparison, are slow, lazy, and poorly built. Why? Because over millions of years, our swimmers realized they weren't usually entering a crowded race. They had the track mostly to themselves. We also literally deleted our biological weapons. If you examine a chimpanzee, a mouse, and most other mammals, they have a solid penis bone called a baculum, and their equipment is covered in microscopic keratin barbs called penile spines. Those spines act like tiny biological snowplows. Their literal job during intercourse is to physically scrape out and remove the semen deposited by a previous male. But around 2 to 4 million years ago, as our ancestors were standing up on two legs and learning how to make stone tools, we underwent a massive genetic shift. Scientists tracked down the exact piece of regulatory DNA that builds spiked genitals, a sequence called an enhancer, and found that humans simply deleted it from our code base. We dropped the weapons. We traded the spiky biological snowplow for a smooth hydraulic system that just so happens to be the thickest and largest of any great ape on Earth. So why did we do it? Why did early humans walk away from the chimp-style sperm wars, shrink our testicles down to medium size, lose the spiked weaponry, and allow our sperm to become lazy couch potatoes? We did it because we got terrorized by the most demanding, exhausting, caloric black hole on planet Earth, the helpless human baby. Think about a baby zebra. A baby zebra drops out of the womb, hits the dirt, shakes off the placenta, and 45 minutes later, it is sprinting across the savannah escaping lions. It is ready for war. A human baby? A human baby is a useless, screaming sack of potatoes that will actively try to end its own life if left unattended for 4 minutes. Because humans evolved massive brains and started walking upright, our pelvises shrank. This meant mothers had to give birth to babies essentially half-baked. It takes years before a human child can even walk properly, let alone hunt a woolly mammoth or feed itself without putting a spoon in its eye. In ancient prehistory, a mother could not possibly forage for food, survive predators, and carry a screaming, helpless infant all by herself. She desperately needed backup. She needed a dedicated co-parent. She needed a man to bring her calories, build a shelter, and stand guard while she slept. But here was her problem. How do you convince a prehistoric male, an animal whose brain is fundamentally hardwired by millions of years of ape evolution, to mate with as many females as possible and immediately abandon them, to settle down, sign a 30-year mortgage, and become a family man? You pull off the greatest psychological trick in evolutionary history. You invent concealed ovulation. In chimpanzee society, when a female is fertile and ready to make a baby, her backside swells up bright red like a neon billboard on the Las Vegas Strip. It visually screams to the entire jungle, "We are open for business right now." The males rush over, do their 7-second deed, and immediately leave. But human females turned off the neon sign. We lost the red swells. To this day, human females exhibit concealed ovulation, meaning there is no obvious physical warning sign when an egg is dropping. This completely broke the male strategy. If a prehistoric man wanted to pass on his genes, he couldn't just drop by on Friday night when the red light was flashing. He had no idea when she was fertile. The only way to guarantee that he was the father of her child was to hang around all month, every month. He had to guard her from other males. He had to share his food. He had to help build the campfire. He was tricked by evolutionary mathematics into inventing dating, monogamy, and awkward small talk just to secure his genetic legacy. So, problem solved, right? We became monogamous family men. We raised our big brain babies together, and we all lived happily ever after in prehistoric nuclear families. Not so fast. Remember the balls. This is where the story takes its final hilarious twist. If human beings truly transitioned into pure, unadulterated gorilla-style monogamy, where every man had his one loyal partner and nobody ever stepped out of line, our testicles would have shrunk all the way down to 30 grams. Why would your body waste precious energy growing and cooling 50 grams of external sperm factories if there was never any competition inside the female? The fact that your testicles are still sitting there, 3 times larger than a gorilla's relative to body mass, is the smoking gun. It is the biological proof that even after we invented marriage, pair bonding, and raising kids together, our ancestors still cheated. Scientists call our ancestral setup a mildly polygynous system with pair bonds. That is academic speak for, we mostly paired off into couples to raise those expensive babies, but there was just enough sneaking into the neighbor's cave on a Tuesday afternoon to keep the evolutionary threat of sperm competition alive. Your testicles are literally an evolutionary insurance policy against your great-great-grandfather getting cuckolded. And when our ancestors sneaked around, they weren't picky. We know for an absolute scientific fact that ancient humans were getting down and dirty with completely different species of human beings. When researchers sequenced the genomes of Neanderthals and Denisovans, our heavily browed, stockier Ice Age cousins, they found something wild. If your family tree originates outside of sub-Saharan Africa, you are currently walking around with roughly 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA in your cells right now. Someone in your direct lineage looked across the frozen tundra at a grunting, heavy-set Neanderthal and said, "Yeah, I can work with that." We even dug up a 90,000-year-old bone fragment in a Siberian cave belonging to a teenage girl scientist named Denny. When they ran her DNA, they realized her mother was a Neanderthal and her father was a Denisovan. She was a literal first-generation 50-50 hybrid of two completely different human species. The Stone Age was not a clean, organized family tree. It was a chaotic, cross-species dating app where everybody was swiping right. But here's the craziest part of that Ice Age romance. While you might have Neanderthal DNA in your skin or your immune system, scientists discovered that Neanderthal DNA is systematically, totally missing from the human X chromosome and from the specific genes that build our testicles. Why? Because nature has a strict rule about mixing species, just like when you cross a horse and a donkey to get a sterile mule. When ancient human men and Neanderthal women had baby boys, those hybrid sons were frequently infertile. Their sperm factories didn't work. So over thousands of years, evolution systematically scrubbed the Neanderthal code out of our testicles, just to keep us shooting live ammunition. Your scrotum literally erased a species to protect your future. So, the next time you jump in a cold shower, or the next time you accidentally sit down too fast and reconsider all of your life choices, show a little respect to the hardware down there. They aren't just inconvenient dangling temperature sensors. They are a historical document 6 million years in the making. They prove that you come from a long line of lovers who traded the violent, knuckle-dragging harem fights of the gorilla for the art of persuasion. They prove that we left behind the 7-second, hyper-competitive orgies of the chimp to build homes and raise helpless, screaming infants together. And they prove that despite our absolute best intentions to settle down and be good, loyal monogamists, we kept just enough backup ammunition in the tank because deep down, our ancestors were always hedging their bets. We are the Goldilocks apes. Not too chimp, not too gorilla. Just a messy, complicated, romantic, occasionally cheating middle ground that somehow managed to conquer the world. And speaking of biological mysteries that make zero intuitive sense, why did evolution decide to take our most delicate, critical reproductive organs and hang them in a fragile, sweaty sack outside the body where a stray tennis ball can end a genetic lineage? Whales, elephants, and manatees keep their testicles safely armored inside their abdomens at full body temperature and reproduce just fine. So why are yours dangling in the breeze? Well, trust me, the answer to that one is even stranger than the Ice Age orgies. But we will save that rabbit hole for next time. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you then.